In this video, we're going to have probably the world's quickest explanation of what's different about temp tables, specifically when you're using them from the command line in TSQL like we have demonstrated here, or if you're using them in a stored procedure. And it's really simple. If you've seen some of my other videos, you've been through this already, or if you've taken the Udemy class. But let me just start off by saying, when I do a select into this table, and we'll call it Spider-Man in case you want to get your kids involved, from the customer type table. There is no superhero table at this time, sorry. And then we're just going to do a select from it. And we could do this really, and let's do this in the Acme database that we're so fond of. We'll hit execute. And it does what we expect. It pulls all these 3 records in the table. But what happens if I try to run this again? There's already an object named Spider-Man. You can't have 2 Spider-Men unless it's a crazy episode in the comic book. The reason why this happens is because, as we know, when we create a temp table, it puts it in the temp database for us in temporary tables. And here we have one now called Spider-Man with a really long name at the end of it. Almost looks like he, made the end of it with his web shooter. Just had to say that for the kids. So you can't keep doing that over and over again. It's kind of like a scope issue, sort of, but not really, because a temp table is persistent for as long as the connection that created it is alive. So what that means is, as long as this, not SQL Server, not SSMS, but as long as this window that I used to create that table is alive, and let me copy this, this will stay open. Watch, if I just close this, and then I go to temporary tables, see, Junior went away. Now, if I create this and run it again, whoops, I have to go to the right database, of course, and run that, then it's fine again. And if you notice in temporary tables, there is another Spider-Man table, but it actually has a different, I don't know if you can see the 4 at the end of that, it was 2 last time, so it's actually same kind of looking table, but it's really different IDs and everything, so it really has a different secret identity. What's different though, let's look at a stored procedure and see how the behavior is actually much different. When we go into the Acme database, and let's open this up a little bit and go to programmability and stored procedures, we're going to go to our temp table example. Let's open that, right click and go modify, and here we go. Now in this case, between the begin statement and the end statement, very similar to what we're doing here. We're going to do select into a temp table from customer types, and then we're just going to say select star from our temp table. Here we're doing the same exact thing, except instead of Spider-Man, we're doing it into Batman. So let's see how that works. I'm going to copy this. Okay, so I can exec the stored procedure. And I'll open up a new window. I always use caps because I'm OCD. Now when we say exec temp table example, the stored procedure, we're just going to run this. It's going to basically do a select into and then a select star. Well, what happens? Well, like our other one, it runs the first time and it's happy. But now you would think that we run this the second time, it'll crash because it'll say, sorry pal, there's a table in the temp database named Batman. But is there? There really won't be. You might see something else in there with like a funny name. But see, there's no Batman, there's no Batman temp table. What's really happening is, when you think about it, a stored procedure initiates kind of like its own connection, different than this one. So when you run this as a stored procedure from the command line, even though this window has its own connection, the stored procedure is kind of running, I'll say on a different thread, that's probably not really correct, but it's running oblivious to this connection per se. So the difference is, I could run this repeatedly, and it doesn't crash. Whereas if I go over here, I run this, and I can only do it one time. So see, one of the biggest differences with a temp table in the command line versus in a stored procedure is, it's not just really scope, it's how the connection is handled. So really the persistence of a temp table with a stored procedure, it's really quick. It's like, now you see it, now you don't. Actually, you never see it because it's really, really fast. Whereas this one, Spider-Man, is going to be hanging out all this time. So basically, for you kids out there, every time I run this, I'm creating Batman, and then I'm killing him, because, Batman's a wimp, he's easy. So this also proves that, for once and for all, Spider-Man is stronger than Batman. One last thing. You might be wondering, well, if this Spider-Man table is a temporary table, it seems like it's really persisting. It seems like it really is going to be living a long time. All you have to do is close the window. It says, do you want to save your following items to a file? No thanks. But now if we refresh this, so much for Spider-Man. He's out of there. So basically, with a query window, you run your stuff, you close the window, the tables go bye-bye. You run a stored procedure, you execute it. Not when you're compiling it, but when you're executing it, it creates it and it's gone. So it won't create a problem where you have to drop the table and recreate and all that kind of fun stuff. You can just run this all day long. Now chances are you have other stuff to do that's more fun, but if you wanted to, you could run that all day long. So that's the main difference between temp tables from the command line and from a stored procedure. Everything else is pretty much the same.